mystery of the missing phone. Okay. Is everyone awake? Do you need to like get up and stretch or do some jumping jacks or anything like that? Um, like before I start, why are you? Who are you and why are you here? I don't know. Like I want to know like the crowd that I'm addressing. I mean, how many people are chatbot writers and have come because they, Okay, so I'm seeing like a couple of hands. So, I mean, can you just call out who you are and why you're here so I know like who I'm addressing, like how to tailor this talk? What about you guys? What do you guys do?
I'm trying to do this.
You're and
I'm a software architect.
okay.
I do web, mobile, and cloud services, infrastructure management, and systems integration.
Okay. So what is it like the people who aren't chatbot writers, what are you trying to get out of this? If you can just like call it out in like 3 words so I just kind of know.
Exposure to the state-of-the-art
Okay.
technology.
Okay. Anyone else? Ditto? Okay, just exposure to the state of the art. Okay. Well, this is, I mean, this talk, I wrote this like for like aspiring chatbot writers, but I mean, you could use it to just get into the head of chatbot writers too. It's not, I mean, it's not, I don't present anything here that's too overly technical or anything like that. So, um, and also, I I know there are questions at the end, but I also like believe in do unto others, and I'm like a firm believer in like interrupting people during their presentation, which I've refrained from doing. But feel free to just if you have a question, just ask it, and I'll address it right away, if it can't wait, or if you just feel like it, I don't care. So anyway, the title of this is Chatbot like Moonshot or Low-Hanging Fruit, and the idea is when you write a chatbot, this is such a daunting problem space that I mean, my background is, let me start by introducing myself. I won the Loebner Prize competition last year, and I wrote my chatbot entirely from scratch. I'm not using AIML or ChatScript or any technology. I just started out with like a blank slate and was completely freaked out in the beginning, and I had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing this or what my goals were. And so I just wanted to kind of retrace that a little bit, for people who are, thinking of doing this on their own, or else for people who are interested in knowing about what goes on in the mind of a chatbot developer and the different approaches that you can take for doing something like that. Um, and I haven't timed this thing, so hopefully I won't go too much over. Um, so yeah, it's intended for people like me who started from scratch, and there are different approaches you can take for chatbot writing. One of them is like I'm going to take Richard's stuff.
Sorry, I want to interrupt.
Sure.
So you gave us a little bit about your background, but you really didn't tell us about your technical background.
Okay.
It's probably significant for the English authors in the audience.
Sure. So the question was, you told us about your background, but not your technical background, and that's a good question. I consider myself like a pretty hardcore programmer, so I definitely don't fall into the camp of people who don't have any programming experience and want to write a bot just by using by making a bunch of AIML categories, which I think is a totally valid thing, and I really like Richard and his technology and everything like that. That just wasn't me, and that's why I chose not to go down the AIML route. And I was also interested in addressing a different set of problems, which I'll touch on in my talk. But yeah, I'm like a hardcore developer, and yeah, and I just wanted to write a chatbot. It was something that was eating away at me for a long time, and I wanted to I read the transcripts and everything like that, and it was something that I wanted to do. Um, so I guess my advice for people who are starting out writing a chatbot is, why are you doing this? Because there are like different kinds of, I don't know, ice cream or whatever, there are different kinds of reasons for wanting to write a chatbot. And I think Richard expressed it more eloquently than I could have. They're really kind of different camps going into this. One of them is like, are you trying to do something like how many people have heard of Watson and Jeopardy? That computer that was able to answer Jeopardy type questions. So basically, IBM wrote a computer program called Watson, and it actually competed on Jeopardy, and it actually was actually able to parse the questions, look at them, look the answers up in the knowledge base, and give the answers. And actually, I should say, parse the answers and give the questions back. And that was like a pretty amazing feat of technology, which has nothing to do with like authoring a bunch of responses like to given situations, because this thing was actually attempting to understand the answer and give the question. So there could be like a myriad reasons why you'd want to write a chatbot. And if you go into it not knowing what those are or what your personal motivations are, then you're just going to be like, I think, not happy. Let's put it that way, for lack of a better explanation. So I mean, are you and the list of and the possible goals that you can achieve also when you're trying to do this is also, I mean, the Turing test, the Loebner Prize, let's take that as an example. So the Loebner Prize, you're supposed to write a computer program that can actually fool the judges into thinking that you're a human being. I mean, what are the odds that you're going to be able to actually do that? I mean, and people think that that's just around the corner. It's not. I'm sorry to burst anyone's bubble if they think that it's just around the corner. It's not. And the odds that you're actually going to be able to do that on your own, it ain't going to happen. I'm sorry. Unless if you do that, I'll give you $100 and you'll be my new personal deity or whatever. But it's not. I mean, you can when you look at I was giving this example at dinner yesterday, or maybe it was a person on the plane. I can't remember. It was like I didn't have a lot of sleep the last couple of days, but for example, when you look at when you look at questions that any human being can answer, but aren't going to be in the list of, I bet you they're not even in the 580,000 categories of that Chomsky bot. Which is larger, a grape or a car? What are the odds that that's going to be in some kind of canned list? Or a question that all human beings answer the same way, but chances are it's not in anyone's database yet. You know, just think of one word that describes where on your face is your nose. Okay? What are the odds that any computer is going to answer with the same word that we all have in our heads right now? You know, so it's a futile attempt to think that you and your own are going to solve this problem. You can try, but I mean, the questions you have to ask yourself are: what are you trying to win a competition? Are you trying to make like a help center? Are you trying to build something you can commercialize? Using what technology? And where's that guy from Seed Philly? I wish he was here, because it would be nice. He's sleeping in the back. I don't see him. Anyway, too bad. I would have liked his feedback on some of this stuff. But anyway, yeah, why are you doing this? So yeah, like I said, if you think that you can crack the code of hard AI and make a truly sentient computer, yeah, dream on. I mean, it's not going to happen. I mean, there are teams of people that could maybe come like this close, like, you know, make this much progress in pulling it off, but just one person, there's no way. That's my opinion, and like I said in the beginning, this may have nothing to do with reality, like what I'm talking about, but this is my opinion. Are you trying to make something you can commercialize? If so, are you, like in my case, why was I starting from scratch instead of using, like, Rich's stuff is really good, like Bruce Wilcox, he does ChatScript, that's also really good. I mean, I would question the value if you're trying to make like something like a bot that has like a list of things that can answer you, of just starting from scratch when there's so much good stuff, and especially with AIML 2.0, like, you know, there's a lot of new stuff that's really compelling there. So I'd question the value of starting from scratch if that's the goal, just making like something that has like a bunch of things that can give a response. So, and also, and this is kind of like maybe sacrilege to this audience, but like with some of this stuff, if you're doing something like a bot that's supposed to be like a call center, and feel free to rebut me if I need rebutting or a kick in the butt or whatever, but a lot of these attempts I see to like make a chat bot that can like replace like a customer service like agent, like I'd question the value add of any kind of technology as opposed to like a search engine. Like what value would that add, when you could just like Google some stuff, and now Google is becoming increasingly good at having you pose things in question-like formats and give you like answers to that. So if it's just that you're going after, then you're going to have competition from just vanilla search engines. So it has to be something value added more if you're going to, at least I believe, if you're going to want to hope to monetize that. And I'm going to, as I do this kind of haphazard talk, I'm going to intersperse like these decision points with my story and my evolution, like as I develop this chatbot.
I'm particularly intrigued by the hard AI, and I understand what you're saying about the impossibility of a single individual doing it. What you said of yourself, a hardcore programmer, do you think it's even possible for a team with decades, even a generation or two work to create a hard AI, or do you think that's just an impossible goal generally?
The question is given that I'm saying that I think that it's impossible for just one person to do hard AI, can a team of developers even approach that, or is that something that's just basically an unreachable goal? I think I don't see any reason why it's not eventually possible, but just like with Fermat's last theorem, and I had like a thing about that on, hey, where's this? Are you going to listen to this talk? I'd like your feedback on some of this stuff. Yeah, if you've got other stuff to do, that's fine. But I just intrigued by
All right, guess I'll win.
I'm not gonna start over, but basically the summary is like these are decision points that a chatbot writer would use in order to like decide whether to write a chatbot, or also what kind of chatbot they're going to write. If they're going to write something that's just like a bunch of canned responses, or if they're going to try to create a real thinking, feeling human being and stuff like that. So I hope I'm not wasting your time if it's not relevant. But I liked your talk this morning, so I was just kind of curious as to what you thought about all this. But as for your question about, going back to your question about whether it's possible for a team of people to do that, if you look at like my kind of approach, my way of reasoning about this is kind of like Fermat's last theorem. It was something that took people it took people like 400 years to actually. Who knows what Fermat's last theorem is? Okay. Fermat's, so in school you learn that like the Pythagorean theorem is if you have a triangle, if this has a length of 3 and this has a length of 4 and then this has a length of 5, and so basically a squared plus b squared is c squared, and basically you can find integer numbers such that a, b and c have solutions.
Point of information from an earlier point. I asked Google, where's the node located on space? And I have answered, the node of the algorithm is somewhere located in the middle of the space. Look in the mirror in the middle of your space.
Yeah, it says middle, but would a chatbot algorithm find that, zero in on that one word middle, and not the word organ or something like that? That's my question. So with and I might run over. Just give me the hook if I need to be given the hook. I think that this problem is solvable. I mean, obviously, I don't believe in like that we have some kind of indefinable soul that without that, let me just finish with this guy first. But
I want to interrupt you because that theorem was solved by one.
yes, and that's what I was going to say. Basically, and so I'm saying that I think that this is solvable. But you're going to have lots of people that are thinking, hey, you had before that one guy solved it. You had lots of people like, yeah, I'm going to solve Fermat's last theorem, and then like they weekend cranked out, and it's just really hard. And the guy who actually solved it, he needed layers and layers and layers and layers. He needed to build on the work of like basically all of modern mathematical theory in order to be able to solve that thing. And the proof was like mind blowing. It's like elliptical curves or whatever. So I think it's solvable. I think it's going to be very difficult. I don't know if the state of the art right now is such that we could solve it in my lifetime, but I think we can definitely make strides towards that. So I'm not trying to discourage people from trying to solve this problem, but I think that it's that hard.
Well, I think one of the points that the anti-chatbot is, for example, voice recognition still sticks, but it has its uses.
Yeah.
And the point, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to commercialize any of this stuff, is that you can take a technology that's imperfect and use it successfully.
And that's
And it will approach, people will think it's as good as the technology that you have.
okay. So what this gentleman, what's your name? Steve. What Steve is saying is that even though you can't necessarily solve the problem, you can basically solve a piece of it, and it can have value. I think is a decent paraphrase of what you're saying, right?
Right.
And I actually agree with that. You're going to see that in the rest of my talk. But basically, if what I'm saying is, if you're going to try to create like a real human being, I think it will be done eventually. Although the burden of proof is a lot harder because we have way different sensory inputs than a computer does. So if you're doing like a Turing test, like the Loebner Prize competition, where you've got a judge trying to pick between like a real computer and the human being, the deck is really unfairly stacked against the computer, because if I ask you to describe like what does a hunger pang feel like, we've got all the sensory inputs that allow us to answer that question intelligently, but then how do you model that sufficiently for a computer program so that it can actually like describe what a hunger pang is the way that you can do it justice? See what I mean? So I think the question of like, can you have a program behave enough like a human being in order to fool it, that may be like an unfair question. But anyway, we're not getting into I wouldn't want to get into like the legitimacy of the Turing test or anything like that. But okay, yeah. So basically, starting from scratch, like I did to build a chatbot, is very hard. And in 2007, I took maybe like 4 or 5 months off, and then I worked on my chatbot full time, and then the stock market crashed, and I told my consulting clients to go away, and it was kind of like a scary time for me. And there's a lot of good stuff available. I could have maybe started with Rich's stuff or with Bruce Wilcox's stuff, but I chose not to do that. So I guess, and the main thing that I learned from that, which I think any chatbot writer would agree with, is you have way less time than you actually think you do. When you actually do this stuff, it's like, holy crap! I spent a week doing this. I thought that would take me like 2 hours. So.
You began your talk saying, hey, you really need to know what it is that you're trying to do.
Yes.
What you're trying to accomplish. From this slide, I guess the feeling, and perhaps it's wrong, that I'm reading from here, is that you did know what the goal was. Is that accurate? As part of your story here is you were floundering around trying to find your goal.
The question is like in the previous slide, I talked about how important it is to know what you're doing, but from this slide, it looks like I was floundering around, and yes, there was some floundering initially, and that's why I wanted to just intersperse like my lessons learned, from my experience. I had this vague notion that I wanted to win the Loebner Prize, and I thought, I'm going to show you in subsequent slides, I was going to focus on the screening questions. But yeah, I mean, I was one of those guys that, like Fermat's last theorem, here I come, I thought I was going to like create this, yeah, right, yeah, it's like, yeah. And so basically I had to really scale down my goals as I went along. So yeah, my initial motivation was like, after I kind of like zeroed in on what my goals were, was when I looked at the Loebner screening questions, and I thought, what would it take to be able to answer these questions? And obviously, when you look at them, you can't write canned responses for a lot of these. Like when you look at, can everyone read these okay? So like, which is bigger, a grape or a grapefruit, like I mentioned before? Or I have a friend named Harry who likes to play tennis. What is the name of a friend I just told you about? What game does Harry like to play? From what I hear, AML2O is starting to get like facilities in order to be able to answer these questions. But you can't just write canned responses for all of these. Even the 580,000 canned responses isn't gonna cut it when it comes to questions like these that any 6-year-old can answer. And so, just to build on this, like here's another snippet of a conversation from Shirtelu, which is like one of the earliest like chatbots written, like I think it was in 1970 that it was written, and this was like an amazing piece of work where basically it was like a limited domain. It was like a blocks world. So basically Shirtelu only knew about like the red, green, and blue blocks and pyramids on a table. So in addition to having like the ability to parse the English language and to give responses, it also had like physics, not physics, but like a model. Yeah, it had physics. It had like a model of its world and everything like that. And it was able to manipulate that model and to report on its model. So basically, you could ask it things like, pick up the red block and put it inside the box. Tell me what you have inside the box. Um, take You could have it like the Tower of Hanoi. You could have it like, stack things on top of things and say why it stacked things. And it was at the time, people people were just blown away by it, and they thought that this was going to like open up the doors to like psychologists and everything like that, just based on this thing's success. But for me, like when I looked at this stuff, um, I thought I thought basically, and this goes back to the thing again, like of the skill set needed to produce these kind of programs. It's a lot different than like being the creative writer like Richard talked about, and then just like building a character and building a story. And I really see this as like, there are two kinds of people interested in that, like the creative writers who want to build a character and stuff like that, and aren't interested in like whether a grape is bigger than a car. I mean, who says that in real life? I mean, why do we care about whether a grape is bigger than a car? Or on the other side, basically, what would it take to answer these questions and to apply to figure out what kind of deductive reasoning rules you need and stuff like that in order to be able to solve these kind of problems? So my thing was that, given that Hugh said that it's obvious, like if you ask the right kind of questions, and if people tell me, oh, Cleverbot was able to fool 59% of the people in India into thinking that it was human, those people weren't asking the right questions. And in 5 minutes, I can train any of you to ask the right questions that'll completely stump the bot. Like examples of that would be like an Italian professor. He asked the question one year, if we shake hands, whose hand am I holding? Yeah, I bet you anything that's not going to be in that 580,000 list of canned responses. So you really need to be able to have some deductive reasoning powers if you have a half a chance of being able to answer questions that any 6-year-old can answer, which we're so far away from being able to do so far. So what I thought is that, given that Hugh was criticized for this contest, and there are a lot of people who poo-poo this contest, like Marvin Minsky, saying, "Oh, this is like a circus sideshow, and this is just a big farce, because it's just these programs that basically a lot of times this casts like a bad light on AI because you ask those simple questions and they can't answer it, and so the AI people kind of get a little bit teed off that you're kind of like disparaging their field or whatever, which I think is ridiculous." And Hugh said, he had a very eloquent response to that. He said basically, it's going to be really obvious, which programs are not the human beings. But as long as we know this, as long as we're all okay, and we just kind of give points to the one that's the most human, then it's okay. This contest is okay, and it's a valid thing, which I totally agree with. And then so the question is like, ascribing a winning entry because of like they won on humanness. What does it mean to be human? Is it human to say, what's your favorite book? Oh, I have an answer to that. What's your favorite sport? I have an answer to that. Or is it human to know which is larger, a grape or a car, and then to be able to answer that? And then the only reason why is because you've applied deductive reasoning techniques that are needed to answer that question. So I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can interpret this notion of humanness, but my erroneous assumption, or somewhat erroneous, was that that if I could just like zero in on a couple of problem spaces and then solve those well for the competition, then even a Shirtlew type entry would win the competition, because if you could really manipulate those red blocks and those blue blocks better than any other program, then the judges would be blown away, and that wasn't the case. But anyway, I still believe that if you're a chatbot writer and wanting to do this, you need to have like a loftier vision than just winning a contest. And I argue that all of the chatbot writers that have been successful in this have had a loftier goal than just, I want to win this prize. It's got to have some kind of goal that has a hint in its about the implementation. And I'll give you an example of that. There's like another slide somewhere which talks about that here. Like when you look at the people that have been successful, I mean, with you, I don't think that your driver was, I want to win the Nobel Prize. It was like creating AI/ML and creating this useful technology that would, be of use to other people. And with Bruce Wilcox's chap script with Rollo Carpenter, it's like when you look at Cleverbot, it's like really amazing stuff that he's doing as far as pattern matching and large databases of previous conversations. And with me, I wanted to focus on deductive reasoning and also empathy, which I'll get into later as to how Chip does that. But it wasn't just I want to win this. I want to just crank out a bunch of canned responses and stuff like that. And yeah, basically for me, the Loebner Prize wasn't so much, I want to win this thing as I want to try this stuff out. And this deadline is really just putting a gun to my head to try this stuff out and see whether I do it or not. Because if I didn't have the deadline or a reason to do this, I probably wouldn't have gotten that off the ground. And then there's this whole Zen kind of thing about detach yourself from the outcome and not letting your emotional well-being be dependent on the outcome. I see so many people that I gotta win this contest, and then they don't make it through, and they're all just bent out of shape about it, and they start abusing the contest organizers and stuff like that. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's if you don't, and that's really symptomatic to me of not having that loftier vision. And also, like, I think that basically in the pre-screening round, and I don't know how the pre-screening round is going to go this year for the Loebner Prize competition because I don't think Hugh is doing it this year. But if it's Hugh doing it, then basically those questions like I showed you, which is bigger, this or that, or like I have a friend named Harry who plays tennis. What sport does Harry play? Like, what is the name of my friend I just talked about? Basically, you can't just get by with canned responses anymore. Cleverbot is like a really, really good bot, that could probably easily win the competition if it got through the pre-screening round. And same with Alice, I think. And now with this AIML stuff, I think that you're going in that direction of being able to do the kind of stuff that the pre-screening questions require in order to be able to get it through to the next round. So, yeah, and this is what I touched on before. Basically, a lot of people approach this as creative writing endeavor, which is fine, but there are other things too, and there are really different mindsets that you need going into it, and different products that come out as a result of that. So that's just something to keep in mind. And oh yeah, as an anecdote, this year I knew I needed more canned response. This year it was like, screw it, I'm not going to win anyway, but I'm just going to submit my bot, maybe just pump in some more canned responses. I fixed some. Basically, I had this cool feature which I'll talk about later on, which involved the program turning the table on the judges, and rather than just like sitting back passively and letting the judges interrogate it and then giving an answer, that it would actually start interrogating the judges and asking the judges stuff about itself. And I think that's the thing that helped me win. But basically, I knew I needed more canned responses, and I couldn't bear to do that myself because I'm not. I mean, I can do it, but it's like this is just a waste of my time, which really just goes to show like the different mentalities involved. So I actually hired this woman in the Philippines to do it for $3 an hour, and she just cranked out a truckload of canned responses, and it's like problem solved. Yeah. So my first goal with Chip Vivant, which is the name of my chatbot that I'm working on, and which I used to win the competition last year, was that I was able to get Chip to answer like the Loebner screening questions. And I actually, in 2008, actually they didn't ask that wasn't the format that they used, and so I actually got slaughtered that year. Like I didn't make it to the final four. But in the subsequent years, 2009, 10, 11, 12, I did make it to the final four primarily because of the strength that Chip had in answering those pre-screening questions that you saw on the previous slide. And so basically, and then I touted on my webpage the ability to be able to answer these kind of questions. And so I found that people were asking me stuff like, the way that they would interact with Chip was they were asking me all kinds of science questions and stuff like that, which I didn't know how to answer. And then I realized that just that, having solved that problem to my satisfaction wasn't enough for me, because I created a bot that was cool. It could answer these screening questions that a lot of other bots couldn't answer, but it was kind of soulless. I mean, so what? I mean, so now it could answer whether a grape is bigger than a car. This wasn't like when you look at, does that mean I have to stop, or is it 5 more minutes? Okay. When you, how do I explain this? How many people know the story of Eliza? Okay, Eliza was this chatbot written in the 1960s, like a really, really primitive chatbot. It was written by this professor named Joseph Weizenbaum, and he wrote Eliza just I don't know, as I don't know, like just to kind of demonstrate some techniques or something like that. But it was like it simulated like a Rogerian, pardon?
He was undergoing Rogerian psychotherapy.
Oh, Weizenbaum himself was undergoing that.
His,
Okay, so apparently. Okay, I don't have that much time, but anyway, he set out to emulate a Rogerian psychiatrist, and for somebody who don't people who don't know what that is, that's the kind of psychiatrist like my mother's really annoying me. Tell me more about your mother. It's kind of like they just kind of they don't really try to solve your problems. They just kind of imitate what you're saying, so you just kind of talk on and then solve your problems yourself. I don't know, but anyway, this bot demonstrated like a level of empathy to the point where his own secretary like once kicked him out of the room because she wanted to spend alone time with Eliza, and this visiting Russian professor started pouring his heart out about how he missed his family and everything like that, and Weizenbaum was just horrified. He didn't think that people would relate to this parlor trick as well as they did. And the funny thing is I find that Eliza even today demonstrates like a level of empathy that's greater than a lot of the chatbots I feel I see, because Eliza kind of made an attempt to care a little bit, whereas like a lot of these chatbots are just answering questions and that's their sole goal. So my second goal was like, what would it take to apply today's technology to that issue of like just making someone feel empathized with and validated and stuff like that. And for me, that's become like a much more interesting problem now than my initial goal of being able to answer the Loebner screening questions. And so with my first goal, and I'll barrel through these really quick, with the Loebner screening questions, the things I need to answer them were deductive reasoning, knowledge representation, object sizes and classes, like, for saying which is bigger, this or that, and things like ConceptNet, WordNet, and OpenPsych, which you can Google for. And I'll make these slides available on chipvivant.com. And I don't know if you're going to have a place where we're going to. So yeah, so you can look all these things up later on. But here, for example, for the techies among you, these are some of my like rules for object sizes, like to show how, and it's using like a Prolog like syntax in order to be able to tell you whether a grape is larger than a car or a mountain is larger than a planet or something like that. So this was my little fun project for like knowledge representation, and other knowledge like how something tastes or what color something is, or how many eyes does a person have, how many noses does a person have. So it's like a Prolog like language I used to do that, and I wasn't happy with any of the existing implementations, so I kind of like cobbled it together myself. Deductive reasoning rules, if something is a solid food or a drinkable food, then it's food or drink. And so if you ask something, can you consume an orange, can you consume lemonade? The answer is yes, because it doesn't specifically have that rule in its knowledge base, but you can deduce those things from these rules. And finally, my second goal of making like a worthy conversational partner that could empathize with you like in a way that Eliza couldn't with today's technology was this guy. He hung out on the Robotron list, and for people that are interested in being exposed to this stuff, there are two really good like mailing lists for that. One of them is the Yahoo group Robotron, which I know that Richard is on and other people are on, and the other one is chatbots.org. And does Pandora also, do you have a forum too? Okay, so that's something that I'm not on as much as I should be. But basically, the two things that I used for the second part, the Eliza 2.0 thing that I was working on, was this guy, this website over here, and just my own ideas, which goes to show that with chatbot writers, you don't have to do like a whole bibliography. When you're doing a doctoral thesis, you have to like use other people's work, and I could do whatever the hell I wanted to, and I didn't have to answer to anyone, and I didn't care, and I liked that. So here, with Gary Shannon's site, the site I showed you before, his way of getting a chatbot to be more proactive as opposed to reactive was to have this notion of slots. If you find out that somebody has a dog, then suddenly there are a whole bunch of questions you can ask them based on the fact they have a dog. What breed is the dog? What is your dog friendly? How long have you had your dog? You know, just this knowledge that you have a dog, you know, if you put that in the model of the user, then suddenly it generates like a lot of more questions that are more empathetic, in my opinion, than just like a question and answer type kind of bot. So here, for example, in the case of musical instrument, here's a snippet of my XML, my model.xml, where basically if you know that someone has a piano, you can say, what style of piano music do you play? Or, you know, my father is a huge admirer of Dave Brubeck. Have you ever heard of him? You know, just by knowing that somebody plays piano, you can answer those kinds of questions. And you know, and like tricks that Eliza like tricks that you can use with today's technology to make it even more powerful is if somebody says my dog, you know, I really love my dog, bang, you know that person has a dog, you're good to go. You can suddenly like your knowledge of that person has increased, you know, and you can ask them questions based on that knowledge. So my conclusions. Before you write a chatbot, know why in the world you're doing this, like unlike me in the beginning. You won't create a chatbot which fuels humans by yourself. Humans that know how to ask the right questions, and anyone with 5 minutes of training can know how to ask the right questions. You know, which is bigger, this or that? If we shake hands, whose hand am I holding? And so my approach is just to focus on like just one or two problems in this space that you think will elevate the field, that will advance the technology incrementally. Focus on those, like do a good job, and detach yourself from the outcome. And in my case, it was the Loebner screening questions and what will we get if we apply today's technology to create a modern day ELIZA. Those are my personal crusades. And so for the question, moonshot or low-hanging fruit, I mean, I guess my answer is obvious. Go for the low-hanging fruit. And this is like we were talking last night with the guy who's asleep back there, and he who just cracked a smile, but he was basically saying that, and I agree with it, that basically this is like a greenfield opportunity. Like basically he used an analogy which I thought was very fitting, like with this notion of like the zoetrope, where people are like looking at it and saying, is this gonna evolve? And then of course it evolved into moving pictures and stuff like that. And we're getting, both me and him are getting these signs that the time is ripe now for this kind of technology to really start exploding. You already see inklings of this, like with Siri, and you're seeing, and it's the same. And he said last night where he ignored one other situation which was similar to that, where basically he was getting signs that some kind of thing was going to explode, and he ignored it. And it was this thing called the internet, where basically people started talking about, yeah, there's this really cool internet thing, and you're going to be able to do this and that. And he was like, yeah, right, you know. And I really feel like, you know, both me and him independently, like in the past couple of months, I've gotten inquiries about like collaboration with this guy in Australia and collaboration with this guy making like humaniform robots. And it's like, wow. And with Siri, now people know what a chatbot is. I mean, maybe they don't know that it's called a chatbot, but they know what it is. Whereas 5 years ago, people didn't, if you said chatbot and then you tried to describe it, yeah, it's a program, talk like a human, they're like, yeah, right, you know. So this is like a really cool time, and it's pretty exciting to be, it's a privilege for me to be part of this. So that's, I guess, what I have to say.
Just a couple of questions, but I think I don't want to have too much. Actually, I have a question.
Sure.
I guess the question is, your bot has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things, like dogs and so on. So you created some kind of ontology or knowledge base. How big is that?
The question is, my bot has a knowledge of a lot of things, and so you've created an ontology, and how big is that ontology? If we go back here, you can see a snippet of it. This file itself isn't very big, but this file is able to refer to WordNet concepts, and that is a big ontology. And so, and I think there might be ties into OpenSci too, but definitely into WordNet. So I don't have my thing with size here. Oh yeah, here we go. Compares this body part thing can be like a WordNet, like I forget what the lingo is for that, but it can refer to WordNet. And so like just like Bruce Wilcox's stuff, suddenly the ontology just like expands, and I'm able to. It doesn't, but the fact, but here I'm saying basically that a person is bigger than a body part, and the fact that WordNet has like a whole bunch of body parts which I can't even identify means that like you can ask questions: is a person bigger than a spleen? Is a person bigger than a liver? Is it bigger than a kidney? See what I mean? Um, WordNet has concepts of land masses and like stellar bodies and stuff like that. So that's how I'm able to piggyback off of WordNet stuff by just adding just a few simple rules in there.